Sorry, Russell. Apologize for that. Good morning and Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. I am happy and delighted that you guys have made it here. That's unbelievable. The kind of work effort that happened this last weekend and all of the prep that happened months in advance. You guys deserve a really big hand. I know that we've done this, but I'm going to keep doing this, okay? I'm going to keep doing this because I brought 12 of my friends to come visit 3 different of the shows, and they all had an exceptional time. They all had a great time. One of my friends came in the afternoon show, and she said, I haven't been to church in a long time. What time is your services? And I said, well, 10 o'clock. You're always welcome. And one on Friday night, she says, we got to figure this out. We keep coming to this awesome production, but we need to start coming to church. And I said, yeah, that would be fantastic. That'd be really great. And so you never know what God is doing. He's always up to something. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had the privilege of hanging out with a young lady who was asking a lot of deep spiritual questions. And she was wondering about all kinds of things. One of the questions was about, does emotions affect our ability to think or make good decisions? That's a really good question, huh? And she asked a lot of other questions. She asked about the darkness that she sees in the world and the difficulty that's in the world around us. And how do you overcome that? Where do you find hope in the world? We're in the middle of a series called The Advent, or The Arrival. We're anticipating, expecting, looking forward to the arrival of Jesus Christ. And we think about his birth, and that's what we celebrate at Christmas. And it's been a great series. We've been looking at how a long time ago, people who God inspired, called prophets, wrote down promises and things that said God was going to do this amazing thing called bring Jesus. We call him the Messiah. The Old Testament written in Hebrew was from that word Messiah, which means sent, the sent one, the one who is sent from God, sent from above. God has sent him, and the Jews have been waiting for years and years and years for the sent one to come to kind of redeem the world, and they were specifically thinking about them, that they were going to be a lot better off when the Messiah came. And so there was this anticipation of the Messiah coming, and yet for thousands of years he didn't come. For thousands of years he didn't come, and so when he came, it was like, what's going on here? They didn't quite expect it. And so we now, as we celebrate Christmas, we like to have this little season called the Advent, so we can start to anticipate and remember his coming. And so in this series, we're thinking about some of the prophecies that were told about before, some of the things that were said about him long ago. And yet, today we're thinking about the reality of darkness. The reality of darkness. Now, I was supposed to kind of play at this. Maybe I can. Look at that. A couple of things that have been talked about beforehand, I should go back and just kind of rewind a little bit, was don't listen to all the voices, pay attention to the one voice. That was one of the things that's been said for the last couple of weeks. How many of you know that Christmas is super busy? No, most of you have been bored the last couple of days. I realize there's not much going on. But there's a lot that can take our attention away from the real meaning of Christmas. There's a lot. Even church stuff can do it, right? Even church stuff can do it. And so there's a lot of voices out there, a lot of voices calling out our attention, and how do we find ourselves in a place where we can focus on the one voice, which is about Christmas? And one of the big points that Pastor Isaac has made the last couple of weeks, which I really appreciate, is even in despair, remember that God knew ahead of time. Even in despair, remember God knew ahead of time. If you're like me, or like any other human being, pain and difficulty has touched your life. In fact, I doubt it's not only touched your life, I suspect it's marked your life. I bet it's been a part of what formed you and part of what even identifies who you are. As I think about the different stories, as I look around the room, I think of all of your stories. It's a hard time for me to kind of focus on my message when I think about you, and I go think about you, and I think about you. All of a sudden, all this stuff floods into my head because I recognize there's a lot of pain in this room. A lot of pain, and sometimes when we look at the pain and difficulty that's happened in our world, we go, what in the world's going on with this? I was going to show you a video this morning, but there's so much I want to tell you that we're not going to show the video, but I want to talk to you about the fact that the world that we live in is in the middle of hopelessness and darkness. If we were thinking about, sorry, well, I thought I had a black screen, but I don't. So how do I get one? It's like this? Maybe? A black screen. I don't. It's okay. turn the screen. That's fine. We're in a world where there's a lot of difficulty and pain. One of the things we think about, right now, the whole political world is up in upheavals. How many of you know that? Okay? And in Canada, we just went through our election process, and that was really fun and very civil. And the U.S. is getting ready for another election, right? As they try to get rid of their president, right? And in the world, we just found out that, now Britain has just finally said, we're going to go with this guy who's going to bring Brexit, who's going to move out of the EU. And then all around, how many think there's a little chaos around the world? A lot of unrest around the world. And there's a lot of war around the world. And because we live in a nice, safe place, we don't always recognize that there are people still being killed even today because of battles and wars that are going on. It's really pretty crazy. And yet there's other problems in the world. We think about the fact that, it's Christmas, and how many are ready to pay all the bills? Right? That's a problem. Right? If you're like me, that's a problem. Okay, that's a problem. Okay? Merry Christmas. Yeah, how do we pay for this? And all the play was about is the store is talking about, why do they call it Black Friday? Because most stores don't turn a profit till after that day in the calendar year. After 9 months of survival, they kind of start making money the last couple months of the year. There's a lot of darkness in the world, but there's also things like personal pain in our lives, where something's happened. I remember as a boy, as an 11-year-old boy, my house burned down, and we lost everything in our home. We lost all of our stuff, and that can create a sense of darkness when you lose everything and there's nothing left. And some of you have been hurt by other people. Some of you had personal pain, death in your own life, and a friend, a family member has passed, and it's created a lot of pain. There's darkness in our world. Right now, we think about the situation that the world is screaming out about, and whether we could agree or disagree with where everyone's science is at, but there's this noise about climate change. That the world is going to come to an end if we don't do something. And when we look at the world around us, we see a lot of darkness. Can we agree with that? We don't find a lot of hope in our family situations, in our budgets, in our money, in our personal situations, our political world. And here's the deal I want you to know about. Okay, you can write this in your notes. Okay? We have a problem. We are living in darkness. It's true, okay? I know many of us, I'm an optimist. The class is always half full. It's always going to be great. Sunny day. I sing when I wake up in the morning. My wife wants to shoot me. These kind of things happen. And so, but there's a reality about our life and our world. We live in a broken, fallen world, and that there is darkness in the world. Isaiah 60:2 says this, "See, darkness covers the earth, and thick darkness over the peoples." There's a reality that darkness is in the earth, darkness is in the world, and darkness is here, and it's covering the whole world. See, when the Jews were ready for the Messiah to come, they were just around the turn of, from AD to BC, BC to AD, they're in that turn. The Romans had taken over, and they were conquering the Jews and putting them under their thumb. And they're making them pay a ridiculous amount of taxes, and they had to abide by all their rules and laws. And the Jews were like, we can't wait for the Messiah to come because he's going to take us out of this situation with the Romans, and he's going to make us the big dogs, and everyone's going to have to come to us, and we're going to be the ruling party. And they were looking forward to this Messiah coming, redeeming them from their present circumstances, from the difficulty of the Roman rule, and from their challenges that they had in life. But here's what I want to tell you this morning. There's a bigger problem than debt, pain, loss, government, and even climate change. There's a bigger problem. There's a bigger problem. Yeah. I asked you a question this morning. I was talking to this one lady, this young girl, and we were having a great conversation, and I was just realizing that she was really wondering, where does hope come from? How do I find hope? She is an intelligent young lady. She recognizes a lot of diseases that aren't cured right now. She recognized that the world that she's living in didn't seem like there are real solutions and answers to the problems that are around her. And she was like, where am I going to find hope? How do we find hope of the darkness? Where do we find hope? Look what Jim Carrey said. He said, "I wish everyone in the world could experience fame and success. Then they would realize that it's not the answer." See, the Jews were thinking that when their Messiah that they had put in their head came, He would make them no longer in debt to the Romans. They'd have their own freedom and they'd have their own success, and then they would be happy. They would have all the hope in the world. Wouldn't that be great? If you just won the lottery, wouldn't it just solve all of your problems? Oh, maybe not. And I think this is the challenge that we have in our world today. We're told this lie that somehow money or fame or some power or resource is going to solve the deep problem that we have inside our hearts, the deep longing, and the reality that we live in a dark and fallen world. It's funny because even Jesus' disciples didn't figure this out. So here they were walking along. Jesus had just fed like thousands of people. Pretty cool story. And then they're walking along, and then Jesus been kind of talking to them and asking them the questions. And he says, hey guys, who do people say that I am? And they said, well, some of them say that you're a prophet. Some of you say this. He says, no. Who do you say that I am? And Peter, he's like me. He's impulsive. He's first one to speak. Every now and then he thinks. And it's great, And so Peter yells out, he says, you are the Messiah. That's what he's supposed to know. That was what everyone was supposed to figure out. That was the big secret to be revealed. That was the thing to understand. We did a whole series on it the last couple months. Fantastic. You're the Messiah. But what's the response that happened next? Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about this. He began to teach them that the Son of Man, what did he teach them? The Son of Man, meaning himself, must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, that he must be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside, and began to rebuke him. But when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter, and he says this to Peter, one of his best friends, closest disciple, one of the ones who's going to actually lead the church later on. He says, get behind me, Satan. You do not have in mind the things of God. Peter, your solution for what the problem is totally messed up because you don't even know the right question. When you think about suffering, when you think about darkness, you're thinking about taxes, you're thinking about the Romans, you're thinking about the hardship that your friend just had, and there's a bigger problem going on than just climate change. There's a bigger problem in the world. Peter, that's why Jesus is saying, I must suffer. That's why I must die. That's why I must have to do these things, because there's a bigger problem at risk than just the Romans overcoming us for a few years here. N.T. Wright writes it this way. He says, what nobody expected the Messiah to do was to die at the hands of the pagans instead of defeating them, to mount a symbolic attack on the temple, warning of imminent judgment instead of rebuilding or cleansing it, and to suffer unjust violence at the hands of the pagans instead of bringing them justice and peace. The crucifixion of Jesus, understood from the point of view of any onlooker, whether sympathetic or not, was bound to have appeared as complete destruction of any messianic pretenses or possibilities to him and his followers might have hinted at. This was not what they were expecting. This wasn't going to solve their suffering. This wasn't going to pay their bills. This wasn't going to overcome the Romans. If Jesus dies on a cross, how in the world does that solve anything? We think about the Messiah, the sent one. We think about the prophecies that we're told about Jesus. Many of the prophecies about Jesus are about his suffering, about his death, about his pain. Why is that? Well, Pastor Isaac mentioned this earlier in the beginning of the series, in the first part of the series a couple weeks back. Genesis chapter 3. We get all the way back to creation, Adam and Eve, and all of that good stuff. And we have God putting man in the garden, and he says, hey, you guys can do anything you want, but you can't eat of this one tree. If you eat of this tree, you will surely die. And so what do we do as human beings? We eat of the tree, because that's what we do. We're good at that. Don't do that? Oh, okay, that's the first thing I'm going to do. And if I don't do it right away, I'm thinking about it, thinking about how I can do it, how I can get away with it, with him maybe not noticing that I'm going to do it. Like, am I the only one who does this kind of stuff? Are you guys in on this? Yeah, we're all in on this, aren't we? Yeah, this human behavior, sin nature. Yeah, we got to do it. So they went and ate of the tree. The promise was, if you eat of this tree, you will surely die. And it goes on to tell us in Genesis chapter 3 that God cursed the serpent. Then he cursed the woman. You can blame Eve for why it's so much fun to have children, okay? That's right in there, okay? Tells you all about how the pain in childbirth is right there, part of the curse. Then he cursed man. He said the ground is not going to produce easily for you. You're going to have to work and the sweat of your brow every day. And how many of us find no matter what kind of work we do, it doesn't end, and it's always hard and requires discipline, and you have to keep doing it every day. Wouldn't it be great if you had this automatic pilot or this coast thing? Wouldn't that be, how many were wishing for neutral? Huh? Neutral doesn't work in life, does it? It doesn't, because every time you put it in neutral, somehow you keep going backwards. I don't know how this works. Like this Mars Hill thing, I don't know. It's like you always go backwards when you go in neutral. God said it's part of the curse. The reason why there's darkness in the world is because mankind, humans, sinned against their Creator and they were cursed. It's not because God made the world cursed. It's not because God wanted it to be difficult. He made it beautiful and perfect and wonderful. He made everything so that people could have a wonderful experience on earth and also have a relationship with Him. But this holy God said, just don't do this. And He wanted to test man. He wanted to give man the opportunity to choose Him or choose what they wanted to do. And man chose what they wanted to do. And God said, if you do this, you will surely die. Look what else happens at the end of Genesis chapter 3. We find this passage here. So the Lord God banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he had taken. And after he drove the man out, he placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim and flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way of the tree. Guys, here's the deal. Many of you have heard me share this before, but maybe you haven't heard this before, but I want to define the word death for you this morning. See, a lot of us have grown up in what we call a Platonic viewpoint of Plato's ideas of how things work. We live from a Hellenistic or Greek perspective. We all have all of our writings and thinking comes from that background. But we as Christians actually have the Bible to look at, and the Bible goes before Hellenism, before Plato. And the idea of death wasn't something that ended or finality, but rather it was something what we call separation. So physical death is when our spirit, which is the immaterial, eternal part of God, how God made us in His image, is removed from our physical bodies, this machine, this car that we kind of operate inside of that we wish we could get fixed and trade in for the new Tesla, right? You can't do that, okay? And God said He's going to give us a new one day, but right now we're left in this broken, cursed body, and where our spirit, because we are physically alive, is now in relationship to our body. When our spirit leaves our body, we are now dead, okay? We're dead. We're physically dead. Spirit lives forever because it's made in the image of God. Our body is gone, but we are physically dead. We as spiritual beings were made in the image of God in relationship with God, but then the curse happened, and now we find in this passage that God cast man out of the garden, out of His presence, and He put flaming swords with cherubs saying, you cannot come here anymore because of your sin, because you have rejected me. I have kicked you out of my presence. Man is no longer in relationship to God. See, we always think about the curse in terms of all of the difficulty in life. But the real problem here, friend, is that we have been separated from God. And when He said, he who eats of this fruit will surely die, He didn't just mean physically. He meant you're going to be separated from me now. And starting from that point on until today, everyone born in the world is born in sin, born separated from God, born in the darkness that we recognize part of the curse, sin, the difficulty, the challenges. But the greater problem, my friend, is that we're born separated in darkness away from God. This is a real problem. Well, Hebrews 9:27 tells it like this. Just as people are destined to die once, after that to face judgment. Isn't that good news? Hey, not only do you have physical death on this earth, and not only are you part of the curse and the brokenness and the darkness that's here, but one day you have to face your Creator and you will be judged. How many of you realize that that's tough? Because if you're like me, I cannot add up to the holiness and the greatness and the perfectness of my God. And you know what I've discovered in my small world? 51 years of living my life? Every human being on the earth, no matter what they say out of their mouth, no matter how they deny they believe there's a God, knows that to be true. And part of why they don't want God in their life is they don't know how to solve the riddle of being able to be accepted by God. This is the darkness they're in. Hiding from God, running from Him, trying to find a way to get away from Him because they don't know how to solve the riddle. They don't know how to solve the impossible problem of human, imperfect, broken humankind trying to be good enough to be accepted by a holy God. And they're lost. I remember in the conversation I had a couple weeks ago with that young girl I was telling you about, this was part of the conversation. She recognized that she couldn't be good enough before a holy God. But what was unique about her was she was willing to actually talk about it and actually admit it and actually say, hey, how do I find solutions to that? What do I do about this? I kind of know intuitively that I can't meet God's expectations and I am lost in this darkness. Dear friends, here's the next point. Jesus had to come and die. We think about the Advent, we think about His coming, we think about the anticipation of His coming. The reality is Jesus had to come and die. He had to come and die. He had to come and die. What it says, it tells us in Mark chapter 10, verse 45, it says that for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give His life as a ransom for many. This is why Jesus came. Why do we celebrate Christmas? Because He was born in a manger? That's cool. I mean, babies are cool. I love babies. Look, we got a baby here. I mean, I'm usually the first one besides Eleanor trying to hold a baby. That's what I do, okay? All right, I love babies. Babies are cool. I love them. Especially when I can give them back. That's so much better that way. But then we don't celebrate Christmas because a baby was born, though that's cool, but it's what the baby did. It's why the baby came. It's who He became. The Messiah, the sent one, the one from heaven, the one God sent on purpose for a reason, to help us in this darkness that we live in, to help us overcome the darkness that we live in, to deal with more than just our economy and our pocketbooks, and help us over beyond even climate change. He's bigger than that. And He's here for a bigger reason. And that's really, really important. Jesus had to come and die. And it says in Mark chapter 10, also repeated in Matthew 20, for even the Son of Man did not come to serve, but to serve, and to give His life as a ransom for many. I want you to read this passage with me this morning. You don't have to read it out loud, but I'll read it. But just kind of read it with me this morning. This is Hebrews chapter 2. Since the children have flesh and blood, meaning human beings have flesh and blood, He too shared in their humanity, meaning Jesus became a human, so that by His, can you say it with me, church? By His, oh, my, that's exactly right. We do have a different version. I'll read it this way then. Maybe not. I'm going to read it here. Just try to follow along. I apologize. I can't do both. I'm small-minded. I can't do all of that at once, okay? Since the children have flesh and blood, He too shared in their humanity, so that by His death He might break the power of him who holds the power of death. Who is he who holds the power of death? We talk about darkness in this world. When we think about who is the king of darkness, the prince of darkness is Satan himself. And God has allowed him to have power, and one of the powers that he has is the power of death. And a lot of people in this world are living in fear of death because they don't know how to make it right with their Creator, and they don't want to do it their Creator's way. Now they're stuck in this difficult journey of, I don't want to die, because if I die, I don't know what's going to happen to the other side because I haven't made it right with my Creator, and I really don't want to. I want to live my own life. Leave me alone, Creator, but what do I do? And so now they're stuck in this quandary of this darkness. And now they have a fear of death. And that's bigger than any fear that we have. And there's the unknown. So he says, since the children have flesh and blood, meaning people, us, he too, Jesus, shared in our humanity so that by his death he became flesh, he became a human, so that by his death he might break the power of him who holds the power of death, that is the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. Ever watch any movie ever? Okay? And they talk, and they always have the good guy. You know, I like watching police movies or high justice, you know, and then the CIA operative, okay, is turned because they got his daughter and they're going to kill her, right? So now he'll do any kind of sacrilegious thing in the world, turn all the state secrets over to the government because his daughter's going to die, right? Yep. Do not see that plot. Is that the only one? This is how it works. That because the fear of death. Fear of death causes us to do anything. And Jesus has come in the middle of the darkness to bring light. He put on flesh and blood so that he could conquer the power of the fear of death and the devil and free those who are all their lives are held in slavery by their fear of death. For this reason, he had to be made like them, fully human in every way, in order that he might become a merciful and faithful priest to the service of God, that he might make atonement for the sins of the people. Isn't that the point? Jesus took on flesh and blood so that we might have forgiveness for sin. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Joy to the world. The Lord has come. I don't have to be in darkness. I don't have to be dead. I don't have to be separated from God. I don't have to be unforgiven. I don't have to be afraid of death. I don't have to be afraid of what's going to happen on the other side. I don't have to be caught up in the political world scene where today's problem is the only thing that we think about. I have an eternity. Amen? And one day I'm going to have a new body. One day I'm going to be with him forever. And until then, he loves me. He cares for me. He died for me. And he rose again, proving his power over sin and death. Merry Christmas. Joy to the world. The Lord has come. He is arriving. We think about his advent, and we have this wonderful promise. Here's the point I want to make to you. The best Christmas gift ever. Amen? The best Christmas gift ever is Jesus. Dear friend, don't miss it. In the midst of trying to figure out how you're going to pay for Christmas this year, in the midst of how to figure out how to forgive your cousin or your wife or your friend or your grandson or whoever it is, in the midst of trying to overcome the pain in your life and the difficulty that's present, in the midst of trying to hear the noise of the political world systems and all that's happening and all the noise about whatever, my friend, don't let it all drown out the true message of Christmas. Jesus Christ has come. Amen? Joy to the world. The Lord has come. Look what some of the prophets have said. The band can come as I just share some of these verses with you. The prophecies of old. Isaiah 9:2. The people, can you say this with me? The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. For those who live in the land of deep darkness, a light will shine. Has it happened? Jesus Christ has come. Look what he says here. Isaiah 62. Darkness as black as night covers all the nations of the earth, but the glory of the Lord rises and appears over you. Dear friends, Merry Christmas, and may we keep him in the center of all that we think and do. Let's pray.